Samantha Harper had been traveling all day. The sun hadn't even risen when she left her apartment. And now, hours later, the city below her airplane window looked like tiny scattered lights, indifferent to her exhaustion. Her suitcase, overstuffed and heavy, felt like a brick dragging behind her. Each step an effort she could hardly manage. Her heels clicked against the cold airport tiles, echoing in the empty early morning terminal. The security lines, the delayed flights, the constant announcements. It had all become a blur of noise and irritation. She barely noticed when she finally stepped into the taxi that would take her to the hotel. Her mind was elsewhere, focused on the soft promise of rest. A warm bed, a hot shower, and nothing else. Her laptop bag hung from her shoulder, weight pressing into her neck, and her eyes stung from the strain of trying to catch up on work emails while on the plane. Samantha had always prided herself on keeping control, on being organized, efficient, capable. But today, all that control felt like it had been stripped from her. The taxi pulled up to the hotel, a tall, glass-fronted building gleaming under the night sky. Its modern exterior, polished and clean, should have been comforting. Instead, it looked cold, almost unwelcoming, like a fortress with secrets hidden behind its mirrored walls. Samantha sighed, exhaling the frustration she hadn't realized had built up inside her all day. She grabbed her suitcase handle, wheezing slightly as she heaved it toward the revolving doors. Inside, the lobby was quiet, almost eerily so. The marble floors gleamed, reflecting the soft overhead lights. A few late-night cleaners moved silently, their motions precise and mechanical. Samantha's shoes echoed against the marble as she crossed the floor toward the reception desk. She barely noticed the modern art hanging on the walls or the faint scent of antiseptic mingling with fresh flowers. All she wanted was the key to her room and a chance to sit down. The clerk greeted her with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Welcome, Ms. Harper. Here is your keycard, room 213, he said, his voice polite, rehearsed. Samantha took the card without much thought, barely looking at it. She was tired, bone-deep, soul-deep tired, and the thought of dragging her body up to the room and collapsing onto the bed made her stomach ache with relief. The elevator ride was silent except for the soft hum of the motor. Samantha pressed the button for the second floor and leaned against the wall, closing her eyes for a moment. The ride was short, but she felt the tension in her shoulders begin to melt, replaced with a heavy anticipation of comfort. The number 2 glowed above the doors, and she stepped out, following the corridor toward room 213. Her hand shook slightly as she slid the keycard into the slot. A soft click sounded, but the door did not open. She tried again. Nothing. Her stomach sank, and a faint prickling sensation crawled up her spine. This wasn't supposed to happen. Hotels, she thought, were predictable. They had rules. Check in, swipe your card, open the door, sleep. That was the plan. But the door remained stubbornly closed. Samantha stepped back and took a deep breath, trying to shake the unease growing in her chest. Maybe it was the long day, the lack of food, the constant stress. She swiped the card again, harder this time, almost willing the lock to recognize her authority. Nothing. Her knuckles whitened as she pushed against the door, but it refused to budge. Her frustration flared. She could feel her heart beating faster, a low hum of panic threatening to rise to the surface. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, voice low, almost to herself. Her fingers trembled as she fumbled to fit the card into the slot again, but the result was the same. The door stayed shut, unyielding, as if mocking her exhaustion. The corridor felt suddenly narrower, the lights harsher, the shadows longer. Samantha's pulse raced as a faint chill crept over her skin. The hotel, which had seemed so bright and welcoming, now felt oddly empty, almost alien. She could hear the faint hum of the elevator behind her, the distant squeak of a cart in the hallway, but the sounds felt strange, disconnected, like echoes from somewhere else. Finally, with a groan of irritation and fatigue, she turned and stormed back to the front desk. Her suitcase trailed behind her like a stubborn child, refusing to keep pace. "My keycard isn't working," she said sharply. forcing herself to sound calm, though her voice betrayed the tremor of rising panic. The clerk raised an eyebrow, tapping on his keyboard. "No problem, ma'am. I'll issue a new one." She took it, exhausted, desperate. She didn't even look at the new card as she trudged back toward the elevator. The same process repeated. Click. Nothing. Her frustration turned into disbelief. Her chest tightened. Her breathing grew shallow, almost ragged. Something wasn't right. And then came the first sound that made her stop dead in her tracks. A soft, slow creak of a door opening down the hallway. Samantha froze, eyes darting. The lights above flickered. A shadow moved in the corner of her vision. Her heart slammed against her ribs, and an icy knot formed in her stomach. She felt a tremor of fear she hadn't experienced since childhood. Her exhaustion was gone, replaced now by something else. The creeping, chilling sense that she was not alone. That something, or someone, was waiting for her. Samantha took a tentative step forward, gripping her suitcase handle like a weapon. Every nerve in her body screamed for her to run, but curiosity, stubbornness, and disbelief kept her moving toward the source of the sound. And as she reached the door to 213, she saw him. A boy, standing in the shadows, watching. Samantha's frustration had reached its peak. Her stomach twisted with impatience and a low, creeping sense of unease. She had walked the polished hotel corridor back to the lobby for the second time, dragging her suitcase behind her like a stubborn, reluctant animal. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, a sound that seemed louder than it should have been, echoing off the empty walls. Every step reminded her of how tired she truly was, how long the day had been, how far from comfort she had gotten. When she reached the front desk again, she barely noticed the soft hum of the lobby's air conditioning or the gentle fragrance of lilies scattered in a vase near the receptionist. Her eyes locked on the man behind the desk, the same polite clerk who had handed her the first keycard. His neatly pressed suit impeccable, his expression the same rehearsed smile she had seen before. She barely cared. "My keycard isn't working," she said, her voice sharp, almost brittle from exhaustion. She held up the second card, her fingers trembling slightly. The clerk's eyebrows rose in mild surprise. He leaned forward slightly, typing something quickly into the computer before glancing at her again. "I'm sorry, ma'am. That's unusual," he said, his voice calm, careful. "Let me issue you another card. That should solve the problem." Samantha accepted the new card automatically, barely looking at it. Her patience had worn thin. All she wanted was her room, her bed, a shower. She barely noticed the faint reflection of herself in the glossy countertop. A woman hunched from fatigue, her hair slightly mussed, eyes bloodshot from strain, lips pressed into a thin, tired line. She turned and headed for the elevator once more, feeling a gnawing irritation. Why wasn't this simple? She had paid for her room. She had every right to access it. The thought that something as trivial as a keycard could stand between her and rest felt absurd, and then, terrifying in its subtle implication that the hotel, something she had trusted blindly, was somehow working against her. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside, her suitcase rolling softly behind her. The familiar hum and slight vibration were almost comforting, a small consistency in the otherwise baffling situation. But that comfort didn't last. As the doors slid open onto the floor of her room, Samantha's hand shook slightly as she slid the new card into the lock. The click sounded, but the door did not open. She pushed against it, hard, her shoulders straining, but it refused to budge. Panic began to creep in, a slow, cold tendril winding through her chest. How could this be happening? She had checked in. She had done everything right. Why was her room locked to her? Her breathing quickened. Sweat gathered at her temples. The lobby's cheerful lights and soft music felt miles away, distant and irrelevant. The door in front of her, mundane and ordinary just moments ago, now seemed like a barrier designed to keep her out. Not a simple piece of metal, but an invisible force mocking her exhaustion and helplessness. Samantha stepped back, her hand pressed against the cool door, her fingers tracing the edges of the lock, hoping for some explanation. She glanced down the hallway empty. Silent. Not a single guest in sight. The air smelled faintly of cleaning supplies, sterile and cold, the scent emphasizing the unnatural quiet around her. A low tremor of frustration passed through her. She turned sharply and strode back to the lobby, suitcase dragging, feeling increasingly like a character in some twisted, invisible game. Her heart pounded not just with tiredness now, but with a creeping sense of fear, the same sharp sensation you feel when you think someone is watching you, even when the room is empty. Back at the desk, the clerk looked up, sensing the tension. Samantha's voice was firmer now, tinged with disbelief. "There's someone in my room," she said, words spilling faster than she could control. "I tried my key. It doesn't work. And now, I think someone is in there." The clerk's face shifted slightly, a micro-expression too quick to catch fully. A flicker of surprise, of doubt, of something unspoken. But he quickly masked it with his polite demeanor. "No one has checked in that room but you," he said slowly, his words careful. "It's impossible that anyone else could be there." Samantha felt her stomach tighten. Impossible? That word alone, spoken in that calm, matter-of-fact tone, made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Her exhaustion was still present, but now it was overshadowed by a sharp, icy edge of fear. She had seen what she had seen. She knew something was wrong. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She forced herself to take a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. "I don't know how it's possible," she said, more controlled now, trying to sound rational despite the rising panic in her chest. "But I saw a boy, a child, standing in my room. I swear I'm not imagining this." The clerk's eyes flickered again, a momentary shadow crossing his features before he forced the same polite, neutral expression back into place. "Ma'am, I assure you, you are the only guest assigned to that room. Perhaps you were mistaken." Samantha's mind spun. Mistaken? The word stung. She had never felt so invalidated, so powerless. She was right. She knew she was, and yet no one would acknowledge it. Her exhaustion, frustration, and now rising fear all collided into a single, sharp spike of emotion. Something in the lobby seemed to grow colder, quieter. She could almost feel the hotel itself leaning in, waiting to see what she would do next. Samantha straightened her shoulders, squared her jaw, and said, quietly but firmly, "I need this resolved. Now." The clerk nodded, typing quickly, issuing yet another keycard. Samantha took it, heart still racing, unsure whether relief or dread would come first. As she turned toward the elevator, a faint, almost imperceptible sound, like the soft creak of a door, echoed somewhere down the hallway. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. The lobby, the polite clerk, the warm lighting, they all felt distant, unreal, like part of a dream or a stage set. And for the first time, Samantha Harper felt the true weight of unease settling over her. An exhaustion deeper than tiredness, a fear that this hotel had secrets, and she was walking straight into them. Samantha had retraced her steps to room 213 more times than she cared to count. Each swipe of the keycard had ended the same. The lock clicked, but the door refused to open. Frustration had long since turned into something colder, sharper. An uneasy sense that the hotel, the very walls around her, were conspiring against her. This time, she stopped a few feet away from the door. Her suitcase rested lightly against her leg, but her fingers gripped the handle like a lifeline. Her breathing was shallow, uneven, each inhale tight, each exhale a quiet protest. Something about the hallway felt different tonight. The light overhead flickered, casting strange, irregular shadows along the walls. For a moment, she thought she saw movement, just a flicker, but when she blinked, it was gone. A creak echoed down the hallway. It was soft, almost imperceptible, but it made her freeze. Her heart beat faster, a rapid staccato that reverberated in her ears. The door to 213 shifted slightly, a small, almost casual motion, as if it were breathing. Samantha's throat went dry. Her logical mind protested, doors don't move on their own. Yet every fiber of her body screamed that something unnatural was at work. She took a hesitant step forward, hand raised to the door handle. The metal was cold under her touch, more cold than it should have been in a hotel hallway. She shivered. Then she saw him. A boy stood in the doorway, framed by the dim light of the hallway. He was small, maybe 8 or 9, but his presence carried a weight far heavier than his size. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. His dark eyes reflected a light that shouldn't have existed in that shadowed corridor, glimmering like faint stars trapped in a hollow sky. Samantha's stomach twisted. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. She wanted to laugh nervously, to dismiss it as exhaustion, but the quiver in her own tone betrayed her. No answer. The boy's lips moved slightly, like he was forming words she couldn't hear. His expression was unreadable, neither cruel nor kind, but somehow deeply wrong, like a puzzle missing pieces. Her pulse quickened. Rational thought struggled against the rising panic. She scanned the hallway. Empty. No luggage carts, no cleaning staff, not even a whisper of movement. She was alone, and yet, she wasn't. The hallway seemed longer than before. Shadows stretched unnaturally, bending at odd angles. The overhead lights flickered again, casting brief, harsh pools of brightness that made the boy's dark figure appear to shift closer, then retreat in a slow, almost teasing rhythm. Samantha tried to pull her hand away from the handle, but her fingers were frozen, gripping as though the metal itself demanded she stay. Her mind raced with every possible explanation. Prank, hallucination, exhaustion-induced nightmare, but none felt sufficient. None made the knot in her stomach loosen. The boy took a step forward, a tiny motion, almost imperceptible. A shiver ran through her spine. She swallowed hard, trying to force her fear down. I need to go inside," she said, more to herself than to him. Her voice echoed strangely in the empty corridor, carrying a weight that seemed to deepen the shadows. The door creaked again, a soft, metallic groan, like the room itself was stretching, breathing. She could feel it in her bones, a subtle vibration through the floor, a presence that was not flesh and blood, but something else entirely. Samantha's gaze flitted around. The boy's face was pale, almost luminescent in the dim hallway light. His eyes, dark, hollow, impossible, remained fixed on her. And in that gaze, she felt an invasion, a silent, chilling communication. She was being watched, evaluated, judged. She wanted to step back, to run, but the weight of exhaustion pinned her in place. It was as if the hotel itself had caught her in some invisible grip, forcing her to confront what she could not yet understand. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet she could not look away. The boy tilted his head slightly, a subtle movement, yet it carried an unnatural gravity. She felt a wave of nausea. Her heart thundered so loudly it nearly drowned out the faint hum of the hallway. Every nerve in her body vibrated with tension, and a chill spread from her spine to her fingertips. Samantha's mind grasped at rationality. "I must be imagining this," she whispered. Her voice, weak and trembling, sounded foreign to her own ears. She blinked rapidly, hoping the figure would vanish like mist, hoping this was some cruel trick played by exhaustion and overworked senses. It didn't vanish. Instead, the boy's figure remained, silent and patient, a dark sentinel in the doorway. Samantha could see now that the shadows seemed to cling to him, wrapping around his small frame, almost protective, almost predatory. The air smelled faintly colder here, sterile but tinged with a hint of decay she could not identify. Fear bubbled up inside her, but beneath it, a small ember of defiance sparked. She would not be reduced to trembling, not completely. She squared her shoulders, took a tentative breath, and stepped closer to the door. The boy remained watching, and as Samantha's hand hovered over the handle again, the shadows stretched further, bending the edges of her vision. Something deep inside her whispered that tonight, whatever this was, would not allow her to rest until she faced it fully. And Samantha, exhausted, terrified, and unsteady, realized with a sinking certainty that her night in room 213 had just begun, and that the dark presence waiting for her was far more patient, far more watchful, and far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The encounter with the boy in room 213 left Samantha shaken. Her heart still raced, her fingers tingling with the chill that seemed to have seeped into her bones. She had stepped back from the door, her body rigid, eyes wide, staring at the empty hallway for reassurance. But there was none. The corridor stretched on, silent and unnervingly still. Her suitcase felt heavier now, dragging on the floor as though it had absorbed her fear. Back at the front desk, she tried to steady herself. Her hands gripped the countertop, knuckles white, as she struggled to put her thoughts into words. There's someone in my room, she said again, her voice trembling slightly. She had seen it. There was no denying what she had seen. The clerk's face remained polite, neutral, almost rehearsed. But Samantha thought she caught the faintest flicker of something behind his eyes, hesitation, concern, maybe even a little fear. "Ms. Harper," he said carefully, "I assure you, you are the only guest assigned to that room. No one else has checked in." Samantha exhaled sharply, frustration and fear battling within her. "Impossible," she whispered under her breath, though her voice was too loud for it to remain private. Her body shook slightly, and she pressed a hand against her forehead, trying to calm the racing of her pulse. "I need answers," she said, louder now, steadying herself against the counter. This isn't normal. Something is wrong here." The clerk paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then, with a quiet sigh, he leaned back in his chair slightly. "Perhaps you should know a little about the hotel's history," he said slowly, as though choosing his words with great care. "It's complicated." Samantha's curiosity sharpened despite the fear. "Complicated how?" she asked. Her eyes searched his face, desperate for honesty, for some explanation that could make sense of the impossible. He leaned closer, voice dropping. "This building has been here for over a century. Not just old, it has stories, tragic ones. Many families have stayed here over the years, and there have been unusual incidents." Samantha felt a shiver crawl down her spine. She had expected excuses, perhaps some polite denial, but his words carried weight. She leaned in, trying to catch every syllable. "What kind of incidents?" The clerk hesitated, tapping a finger lightly on the desk. "Children, sometimes. Guests have reported seeing children that shouldn't have been there. Rooms that were empty but somehow not. Guests have checked in and later said they were not alone. Some left early. Some never returned." Samantha's chest tightened. Her mind raced, connecting dots she hadn't realized were there before. The boy she had seen, pale, silent, watching. He wasn't a prank, nor an illusion of exhaustion. He was part of a story, a history that she had stumbled into unknowingly. Her throat went dry. "You mean room 213? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The clerk's expression softened, tinged with regret. "Yes, that room has a reputation. People say it has attachments, spirits, presences. Guests who spend a night there often feel watched, sometimes threatened. It's why we rarely assign it unless absolutely necessary. But you had no choice. You booked it. You arrived. And now, well, you've encountered it." Samantha swallowed hard, a mix of disbelief, fear, and the first glimmer of anger rising in her chest. She had been tired, yes. She had been exhausted, vulnerable. And now she understood why the ordinary frustration of a keycard that wouldn't work had escalated into something more terrifying. Her hands gripped the counter tighter. "So, this isn't new?" she asked, voice steadier now. Her pulse still raced, but her mind had begun to shift from pure panic to focused determination. "This has happened before?" The clerk nodded, his face serious. "Yes, many times. The boy, he's been seen before. Sometimes he appears to those who are alone, exhausted, unprepared. He doesn't speak. He doesn't move like a normal child. He watches, and some say he never leaves." Samantha felt a wave of cold wash over her, but with it came a spark of resolve. She was tired of feeling powerless. She would not be cowed by shadows or whispered legends. She had seen him. She had felt the weight of his stare. And now she understood the stakes. "I need to know everything," she said firmly. Her exhaustion faded into determination. She wanted records, old guest logs, newspapers, anything that could explain what she had encountered. She would uncover the truth, piece by piece, and she would not let fear dominate her. The clerk gave her a small, almost sorrowful smile. "If you truly want the truth, it won't be easy. But perhaps it's better that you see it for yourself." Samantha straightened her shoulders, taking a deep, steadying breath. Her body still ached from the day, and yet every nerve in her body was alive with alertness. She had crossed a threshold. She had glimpsed the hidden history of room 213, and she knew one thing with absolute clarity. She would not leave this hotel, not tonight, not without understanding what waited behind that door. As she turned back toward the hallway, keycard in hand, she felt the faintest draft brush against her cheek. The air seemed to hum with anticipation, as though the hotel itself was aware of her resolve. Her pulse quickened again, not with fear, but with focus. Tonight, she would face the hidden truth, and she would not run. Samantha returned to the lobby with a new sense of purpose, her earlier fear tempered by determination. She had finally learned that room 213 carried a history, one dark and unsettling. Yet knowing the room's reputation was only a fragment of the truth she needed. She wanted details. She wanted names, dates, stories, anything that could explain the boy she had seen, the oppressive stillness of the hallway, the inexplicable cold that had crept into her bones. The receptionist observed her quietly, fingers resting on the keyboard. He seemed to weigh every word he might offer. Finally, he leaned slightly forward, his voice low and cautious. "If you truly want to understand, you need to know about the hotel's past. It isn't just old. It's layered with stories, tragedies, disappearances, things that cannot always be explained." Samantha's eyes widened. Disappearances? Her voice was soft but edged with disbelief and urgency. She gripped the countertop, knuckles white, feeling the texture of the marble beneath her fingers as a grounding point. "I've seen things. A boy in room 213. I can't explain it, but I know I'm not imagining this." The clerk nodded, almost sympathetically. "That's why I said it isn't new. Guests have reported seeing children over the decades. Not always at the same time, not always clearly. Some see shadows, some hear footsteps, some even speak to them. And some, they leave the hotel early, terrified, unable to continue their stay." Samantha felt a chill ripple across her skin, a deep shiver that reached her bones. Her mind flashed back to the boy standing silently in the doorway, his dark, hollow eyes, his pale, still face. She could feel the weight of that gaze again, pressing down on her chest. Her breathing quickened, shallow, irregular. She felt a mix of terror, exhaustion, and the faint spark of curiosity that refused to be smothered. "Do you know who this child is?" she asked cautiously, leaning closer, her voice low. The clerk hesitated, choosing words carefully. "Not exactly. People call him a presence, a lingering spirit. Some believe he is the echo of a child who died here long ago. Others think he's something else entirely. But one thing is consistent. He appears to those who are alone, tired, vulnerable. You fit that description tonight." Samantha's pulse thudded in her ears. Her chest tightened as dread and disbelief fought for dominance. But beneath it all, a spark of resolve kindled. She was exhausted, yes, but she was not helpless. She refused to be a victim to history, legend, or the unexplained. She wanted the truth. She needed it. The receptionist slid a folder across the counter. "These are old records. Guest logs, newspaper clippings, incident reports. It isn't complete. Some files were lost or destroyed over the years, but it should give you a sense of the room's history." Samantha accepted the folder carefully, her hands steady despite the racing of her heart. She flipped through the yellowed pages, her eyes scanning the faded text and grainy photographs. Names of families, dates, and ages of children stared back at her. Many reports described children appearing in empty rooms, laughter echoing in hallways, shadows shifting unnaturally. Some guests swore the child looked pale and cold, his eyes impossibly dark. Others had left without explanation, claiming they couldn't stay another night. Her mind raced. The boy in room 213 wasn't an anomaly. He was part of the room's fabric, part of the hotel's legacy of fear. The weight of decades of unspoken stories pressed on her, a mixture of sorrow, horror, and fascination. She could almost feel the lives of previous guests lingering in the air, their fear echoing faintly through the polished marble floors and dimly lit corridors. Samantha closed the folder for a moment, exhaling slowly, trying to steady herself. She felt a pang of empathy for those who had encountered this presence before her. Yet she also felt a spark of defiance. They had fled. Some had given in to terror. She would not. The clerk observed her, his expression unreadable, then spoke softly. Room 213 chooses who it reveals itself to. It's never violent, not in the usual sense, but it can be persistent. It wants attention, acknowledgement. That's why it watches. That's why it waits. Samantha's jaw tightened. Her fatigue, her fear, her helplessness. They had fused into determination. She would not allow herself to be frightened into submission. She would learn, understand, and confront whatever presence lingered. The history of room 213, the past encounters, the warnings in yellowed newspapers, they were not chains to bind her. They were tools, information she could use. She stood a little taller, shoving her exhaustion aside. Her fingers traced the edge of the folder, grounding herself in its reality. She had seen something inexplicable, yes, but now she had context. She had history, and most importantly, she had choice. Her pulse steadied as a quiet resolve took hold. Tonight, she would return to room 213. She would face the past, uncover the truth, and ensure that whatever presence lingered would know she was not afraid. Samantha left the lobby, keycard in hand, suitcase rolling softly behind her. The hallway stretched ahead, dim and flickering, but her steps were steady. Shadows clung to the walls, but her resolve held stronger. Room 213 awaited, and this time, she would meet it on her own terms. The hotel was silent around her, but Samantha felt no loneliness. She carried with her knowledge, determination, and a nascent courage that had been forged in exhaustion, fear, and the faint whispers of history. Whatever secrets room 213 held, she would face them, and she would endure. Night had fallen, and the hotel seemed to shift around Samantha. The cheerful warmth of the lobby earlier in the day was gone, replaced by a hushed, heavy stillness. The corridors were dimly lit, and shadows pooled in the corners, stretching longer than they should have. Every sound, her footsteps, the soft roll of her suitcase, the faint hum of the elevator, seemed unnaturally loud. Samantha paused in front of room 213, keycard in hand. Her heart hammered, a rapid, uneven rhythm that made her ears ring. She glanced down the hallway, empty, silent, yet she felt it before she saw it. A subtle, cold draft brushing against her cheek, a chill that didn't belong to the air conditioning. She swallowed hard, tightening her grip on the suitcase. The first attempt at opening the door was familiar. Swipe, click, nothing. The lock remained unyielding, stubborn as if mocking her. Her shoulders stiffened, and a shiver ran down her spine. She tried again, slower this time, forcing herself to remain calm. The lock clicked, but the door only inched open a fraction, as though it resisted her entry. Then came the faintest sound, a whisper of movement inside the room. Soft, almost inaudible, like a breath against her ear. Samantha froze. Her pulse leapt, and her stomach twisted. The hallway lights flickered overhead, casting a brief glow on the open door. And there he was, the boy, standing in the shadows exactly as she had seen before. His pale face was expressionless, his eyes impossibly dark, reflecting the dim light like two small voids. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just watched, patient and silent, as if waiting for her next move. Samantha's mind raced. Every rational thought she had clung to over the past hours faltered. She had read about the hotel's history, seen the old records, understood that the room had a reputation. But understanding did little to quell the primal terror that shot through her body. Her legs felt weak. Her fingers trembled against the suitcase handle. Her breathing was shallow, irregular, as if the cold air itself had stolen control of her lungs. "Who are you?" she whispered, barely able to form the words. Her voice echoed faintly down the empty corridor, swallowed almost immediately by silence. No answer. The boy tilted his head slightly, a subtle motion that somehow seemed unnatural. Shadows around him shifted, bending as though the light itself was drawn to him. Samantha took a tentative step forward, heart hammering. Her fingers hovered over the door handle, frozen between fear and resolve. She could feel her own reflection in the polished floor. A pale, tense woman, trapped in a moment that seemed suspended in time. A low creak echoed from inside the room, a chair scraping against the floor, perhaps, though Samantha could not see it. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Her pulse thundered. Every instinct screamed at her to turn and run, yet her feet remained planted. Curiosity, stubbornness, and a tiny ember of courage anchored her. She needed to know. She needed to confront this presence. Slowly, she pushed the door open further, the hinges groaning in protest. The room beyond was dimly lit, corners swallowed by darkness. The air smelled faintly of old wood and dust, with a subtle, unplaceable metallic tang that made her stomach churn. The boy remained where he was, a silent sentinel in the gloom. Samantha stepped inside, suitcase rolling softly behind her. Her eyes darted around, searching the corners for movement, for explanation, for something tangible. Every shadow seemed to twitch at the edges of her vision. She could hear faint creaks, floorboards settling, or something else entirely. A cold wind brushed past her. She gasped, pressing her arms against her chest. The lights flickered, casting long, shifting shadows across the room. And then, softly, a whisper, so faint she almost thought she imagined it. "Stay!" Her blood ran cold. She spun, but there was no one. Only the boy, still watching from the corner, silent and unmoving. Her pulse raced, a relentless drumbeat in her chest. Her stomach twisted with dread and awe. The presence was patient, persistent, aware. And Samantha realized she was not alone. Not just in the room, but in the building itself. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to flee, but she stayed. Fear had sharpened her senses, heightened every sound, every flicker of light. She could feel the boy's gaze pressing on her, probing, evaluating, as if judging whether she was worthy of attention, or just another visitor to flee in terror. Samantha's hands shook, her lips quivering, but she took a deep, steadying breath. She would not collapse. She would not run blindly. The night, the shadows, the boy, whatever force had haunted room 213, would not dominate her. She would endure and she would face it. And so, standing in the dimly lit room, keycard clutched in one hand, suitcase at her side, Samantha Harper became conscious of a new resolve. The night was dark. The presence was patient. But she had arrived, and she would not leave without confronting the terror that awaited her. Samantha's breathing had slowed slightly, but her mind refused to calm. The boy in room 213 had not moved. He had not spoken, yet his presence pressed down on her chest like a weight she could not lift. Every shadow in the room seemed to stretch unnaturally, twisting just beyond her vision. The air was cold, heavy, and scented faintly of dust and something metallic she couldn't name. She sank onto the edge of the bed, suitcase still by her side, fingers clutching the handle. Her pulse raced. Her mind replayed every moment. The flicker of the hallway light, the slow tilt of the boy's head, the unblinking stare. Each detail repeated itself in her thoughts like a broken record, refusing to be ignored. "Am I losing it?" she whispered, almost to herself. Her voice trembled, The rational part of her brain fought against the irrational fear clawing at her. She had read the hotel's history, the reports, the records, but knowledge did little to quiet the storm in her chest. The boy was here. The room was alive with something she could feel but not touch. She rose to pace. Each step echoed too loudly in the small space, bouncing off the walls. The shadows shifted, seemingly in response to her movements. When she stopped, they seemed to lean closer, pressing against her vision. Her hands shook as she rubbed her temples, trying to shake the feeling of being watched. Sleep was impossible. She closed her eyes for a moment, hoping that if she blinked long enough, the presence would vanish. But when she opened them again, he was still there. Same spot, same posture, same empty stare. The rational explanations she clung to, fatigue, imagination, stress, felt like fragile barriers against the undeniable truth. Her thoughts spiraled further. She pictured every guest who had encountered the room before her. People who had fled, people who had reported strange noises, people who had never returned. She imagined them, one by one, trapped in the same invisible grip that held her now. The weight of their fear pressed down on her, mingling with her own. Samantha tried to speak, to break the silence. "Why are you here?" she asked, voice stronger than she felt. No answer came, only the faint rustle of air, a sound like whispering, distant and close all at once. She shivered, drawing her arms around herself. Her exhaustion, fear, and frustration collided, a whirlwind she could not control. The boy's gaze seemed to follow her as she moved. She spun, every nerve alert, but he remained stationary. His eyes, impossibly dark, reflected her own panic back at her. For the first time, she realized that her own fear fed the presence, gave it strength, or at least it seemed so. Every heartbeat, every shallow breath, seemed to amplify the weight of the room. Samantha sank to the floor, curling her arms around her knees. The suitcase rested beside her, forgotten. Like a small lifeline she no longer had the energy to use. She closed her eyes, imagining herself elsewhere. Back on the plane, walking into the lobby, anywhere but here. But the mental escape failed. Every image faded into the shadows that now felt alive, whispering faintly, testing her resolve. She opened her eyes and focused on the boy. He remained silent, motionless. She realized, with a pang of clarity, that he was not just an observer. He was a mirror. Her fear, her exhaustion, her doubt. They all reflected back at her. The room did not need to move him. The presence existed through her mind, through her perception. Tears prickled at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had come this far, faced the impossible, and yet she had never truly fled. This room, this presence might push her to the edge, but she was still standing, still observing, still calculating. She would not allow herself to crumble completely. Minutes or hours passed, though time seemed meaningless. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the overhead light, every shifting shadow amplified her awareness. She could feel her heartbeat in her ears, could taste the tension on her tongue. But beneath it all, beneath the terror and exhaustion, a single ember of determination glowed. Samantha straightened slowly, brushing damp hair from her face. Her gaze locked onto the boy, unflinching this time. He remained, but she felt a subtle shift. Not in him, but in herself. She was no longer simply a visitor in this haunted room. She was an active presence, observing, questioning, resisting. Fear still coursed through her veins, but now it carried purpose. The spiral of terror had reached its apex. She had faced the unknown, faced the whispers, faced the unblinking gaze of the boy. And as she drew in a deep, controlled breath, Samantha Harper realized that though nightfall had brought terror, it had also revealed her strength. She would endure, she would confront, and she would not be broken. Samantha took a deep, trembling breath and stepped forward. The air in room 213 felt thick, almost liquid, pressing against her skin. Every step she took echoed faintly on the polished floor, each sound amplified in the heavy silence. Her eyes darted around, scanning every shadow, every corner, every flicker of light. The boy stood where he always had, pale and still, his dark, hollow eyes locked onto her. Her fingers gripped the suitcase handle tightly, knuckles white, as if it were a lifeline to the outside world. The keycard felt heavy in her pocket, a fragile barrier between her and the unknown. Fear surged up her spine, icy and insistent, but beneath it, something else stirred, determination, raw and stubborn. She would not flee. Not tonight. Not without understanding. "Who are you?" she asked, voice steady despite the tremor beneath. It was the first time she had spoken directly, demanding answers. The silence answered her. The boy's gaze did not waver, but there was a subtle shift, a slight tension in his posture, as though he acknowledged her courage. Samantha took another step closer. She could feel her pulse in her temples, hear it in her ears, loud and insistent. The shadows stretched and bent, reacting to her presence. Yet she did not flinch. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat, but she forced her legs to obey her mind, to carry her forward. The room seemed to shrink around her, corners bending slightly in the dim light. The boy remained in the shadows, silent, patient, a sentinel that tested her will. Samantha's mind raced, recalling every record she had read, every newspaper clipping, every story of past guests. They had fled terrified. She would not. She would face this presence, and she would assert herself. "Why are you here?" she asked again, louder this time, letting the words fill the space. "What do you want from me?" No answer came, only the subtle rustle of air, the faint hum of the buildings settling around them. Samantha's eyes narrowed. She could feel the boy's stare burning into her, probing, almost assessing her. She realized that this was a confrontation not of violence, but of wills. Fear had been his weapon, exhaustion had been his tool, and now resolve would be hers. She placed her suitcase on the floor and straightened her shoulders. "I'm not afraid of you," she said firmly, her voice echoing slightly in the dim room. "I'm not a child. I will not run. I will not give you my fear." The boy tilted his head, just slightly, a subtle, almost imperceptible motion. Shadows around him shifted, bending unnaturally, as though the room itself responded to her defiance. Samantha felt the cold draft again, brushing against her skin, but it no longer paralyzed her. She focused on her breathing, each inhale slow and deliberate, each exhale steadying her nerves. She stepped closer, stopping only a few feet from him. The weight of his presence pressed on her chest, but instead of shrinking back, she squared her shoulders. "I understand now," she whispered softly, almost to herself. "You are not here to hurt me. You are part of this room, this building, this history, and I respect that. But I will not be your victim." Her voice, firm yet calm, seemed to resonate in the shadows. The boy's figure remained still, but the tension in the room shifted. The oppressive weight lessened slightly, as though acknowledging her courage. Samantha's heartbeat, once frantic and erratic, began to slow, her chest rising and falling more evenly. She moved slowly around the room, observing the corners, the furniture, the faintly shifting shadows. The boy followed with his gaze, silent and unblinking, but no longer pressing down on her with the same intensity. Samantha realized that the confrontation was not about forcing him away. It was about reclaiming her own space, asserting her presence, refusing to be controlled by fear. Hours, or perhaps minutes, passed. Time had lost meaning, yet Samantha stood firm, unyielding. She spoke softly, recounting what she had read in the hotel's history, acknowledging the stories of past guests, acknowledging the boy's place in the room. Each word seemed to ripple through the space, creating a fragile bridge between her and the unseen, a tentative understanding forming in the tension. Finally, she stepped back and regarded the boy, fully present in the room now, not shrinking from fear, not fleeing. She had faced the antagonist. She had endured the presence of something unknown, something ancient and patient. And in doing so, she felt a subtle shift, not in him but in herself. Samantha Harper realized that fear was not a prison. Knowledge, courage, and presence were her weapons. The room, the boy, the shadows, they were no longer entirely strangers. She had faced the antagonist, and she had not broken. She had reclaimed her agency, and in that, there was power. The events of the previous nights weighed heavily on Samantha, but they also sparked a new clarity. Fear had chased her through the corridors of room 213, and the boy's silent presence had tested every nerve. Yet now, she felt the first spark of control. She would not simply endure. She would act. She would plan. She would confront this haunting, armed not just with courage, but with preparation. She returned to the lobby once more, suitcase in tow, and sought the receptionist's counsel. The clerk regarded her quietly, noticing a subtle shift in her demeanor, from exhaustion and panic to a controlled, deliberate focus. Samantha explained her intention. She wanted to understand the presence fully, to observe it, and to document it. She would not be passive anymore. "Documentation will help," the clerk said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "It may not change what happens, but it will give you perspective." Others who tried to face room 213 without preparation did not fare well. Samantha nodded, absorbing the warning without fear. It was a tool, not a threat. She returned to her room, her mind racing with plans. She emptied her suitcase onto the bed, laying out pens, notebooks, and her camera. Every item felt like armor, a means of control over the uncontrollable. First, she decided to map the room. She drew diagrams of furniture, corners, windows, and light sources. She noted shadows, reflective surfaces, and door positions. Each measurement and observation grounded her, anchoring her to the physical reality while acknowledging the unknown. Next, she prepared recording devices. The camera was set to capture the entire room, from every angle, with additional audio recording equipment hidden in corners. Samantha adjusted each device meticulously, checking batteries, angles, and light sensitivity. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips, but she worked steadily, deliberately, letting fear fuel her attention to detail rather than paralyze her. She considered timing. The presence had appeared consistently at night, when the room was quietest, when shadows stretched longest. She would confront it then on her terms. She also planned contingencies. If she felt overwhelmed, she would retreat to the lobby. If any equipment failed, she would record manually. She could not leave her strategy to chance. Samantha reviewed her notes on the hotel's history again, reading the old guest reports, newspaper clippings, and archive logs she had obtained. Patterns emerged. The boy appeared to guests who were alone, tired, or vulnerable. He watched silently, but rarely interacted directly. Some reports described faint whispers. Others mentioned shadows bending or shifting. Every detail added to her understanding and shaped her plan. She prepared mentally as well. She rehearsed her approach, visualizing herself entering the room, maintaining calm, observing the presence, and asserting her control without panic. She practiced her breathing, slow and steady, focusing on grounding herself in the present moment. The room's atmosphere might be oppressive, the shadows threatening, but her mind would remain clear. Finally, she set up markers and notes near the door, reminders to check each corner systematically. She placed subtle signals to alert her if the boy moved, small pieces of paper that would shift if disturbed. Each precaution was a way to maintain authority in a situation where normal rules did not apply. As night fell, Samantha felt a mixture of nerves and anticipation. She ate lightly, drank water, and donned comfortable clothes that would not restrict movement. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her jaw was set, her posture erect. She was ready, not because fear had vanished, but because she had learned to work with it, to harness it, to direct it toward careful action rather than panic. The corridor outside room 213 was dim, almost suffocating in its silence. Samantha approached with quiet determination, suitcase rolling softly behind her. She glanced down at her notes and diagrams one last time, feeling the weight of preparation grounding her. This was no longer a passive encounter. She would observe, She would document. She would confront. The keycard felt heavy in her hand, but it was not a tool of access alone. It symbolized control. She would enter the room on her terms. Her pulse raced, yes, but it was steady and purposeful. Shadows stretched along the hallway, corners seemed to shift slightly, and the room awaited her. Samantha took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and pressed the keycard into the lock. The door clicked open. Her heart thundered, but her mind was focused. This night, she would face room 213 with strategy, courage, and observation. She would step into the unknown fully prepared. For the first time since she arrived at the hotel, fear was no longer an enemy. It was a guide, sharpening her awareness, her senses, and her resolve. The confrontation would begin, but she was ready. Room 213 would not catch her unprepared again. The room was quiet, but the silence was heavy, almost alive. Samantha Harper stepped inside, suitcase in hand, cameras and recording devices already positioned in the corners. Shadows clung to the walls like liquid, curling and stretching unnaturally. She took a deep breath, letting it fill her lungs, steadying her nerves. Tonight, she would confront the presence that had haunted room 213 since the beginning. The boy remained in his usual spot, pale and motionless, eyes dark voids that seemed to pierce through the dim light. He watched her, patient, silent, as if measuring every step, every heartbeat. Samantha felt a twinge of fear, but it was tempered by determination. She had prepared. She had studied. She knew this presence thrived on fear, and tonight she would deny it. "I know you're here," she said firmly, her voice echoing slightly in the still room. "I see you. I know your history. I know this room's story. You do not frighten me." The shadows quivered at her words, and she felt a subtle shift in the air. The boy tilted his head slightly, the faintest motion, as if acknowledging her courage. Samantha's chest tightened, but she forced herself to remain upright, shoulders squared. Every instinct screamed for her to retreat, but she held her ground. She began documenting systematically. Her camera captured the entire room, her audio devices recording every creak, every whisper, every subtle movement. She moved deliberately, checking corners, angles, and shadows, noting how they bent and shifted. Each step was slow, precise. Fear was present, yes, but it was now a tool, sharpening her senses, heightening her awareness. The boy moved slightly, a small shift of weight, and Samantha noted it calmly. She did not react with panic. She observed, documented, and remained in control. The room seemed to pulse with energy, shadows stretching longer, flickering with the dim light, but she stood firm. "You want me to be afraid," she said, voice steady. "But I am not afraid. I will remain. I will understand. I will observe. And I will respect your presence. But you will not control me." The boy's gaze remained fixed, unblinking, yet she could feel a subtle change. The oppressive weight that had pressed on her chest for nights seemed to lift slightly. The room was still tense, still charged with an energy she could not explain, but it was no longer suffocating. Samantha realized that by confronting it, by asserting her will and presence, she had reclaimed part of the room's power. Minutes or hours passed indistinguishably. Samantha moved through the space, checking each device, reviewing her notes, and speaking softly to the room. "I see you. I acknowledge you. I will not flee. I will not be diminished by fear." Each statement seemed to ripple through the room, shifting the tension in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. She paused in the center, taking a deep, deliberate breath. The boy remained, but the subtle hostility that had hung in the room felt diminished. She understood now. This presence was not malevolent in the way humans were. It was persistent, yes, it watched, it tested, but it responded to recognition, to observation, to acknowledgement. By facing it without fear, she had disrupted its usual pattern. Samantha reviewed her recordings. The cameras had captured the shadows bending unnaturally, the faint flicker of the boy's figure, subtle sounds that the ear alone could not detect. Her audio devices recorded faint whispers, too soft to understand, but undeniably present. She smiled faintly. Documentation was complete. Evidence existed. She was no longer at the mercy of unknown forces. The boy remained a sentinel in the corner, pale and still, eyes dark and unblinking. But Samantha felt no threat now. She had faced the antagonist, asserted her presence, and reclaimed agency over the space. She had endured the room, confronted its history, and emerged with knowledge, control, and understanding. For the first time, the room felt almost ordinary. The shadows still moved, the corners still held secrets, but they no longer loomed with menace over her. She had confronted the presence directly, observed it systematically, and maintained her composure. The night's terror had transformed into clarity. Samantha stood in the center of room 213, hands on her hips, suitcase at her side, cameras blinking silently in the corners. She had not fled. She had not panicked. She had faced the unknown, documented it, and emerged intact. Relief and triumph washed over her, subtle but unmistakable. The boy finally tilted his head one last time, a subtle acknowledgement, before remaining motionless. Samantha understood. She had earned a fragile truce. The room's power had not diminished, but her power, her presence, her courage had grown. She had faced the antagonist, and in doing so, she had proven to herself that fear could be met, observed, and overcome. Some things in life seem impossible to fight, but standing firm, documenting truth, and refusing to be cowed by forces beyond our understanding. That is where real strength lies. Samantha didn't just survive. She reclaimed her agency, and that is the ultimate victory. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and tell us in the comments. Have you ever felt like something was watching you? And of course, subscribe for more tales of suspense, horror, and justice that will keep you up at night.